Hey everyone, Wayne Fox here with a video today. We're going to talk about issues with your Epson printer and connection problems. Worst case scenario, you might have to perform a procedure which has been referred to as the Epson Enema. Now, if you want to know what the heck that means, just stay tuned. So first of all, let's talk about the term Epson Enema. I didn't come up with it. It was coined by Andrew Rodney. Digital Dog is his nickname. He's actually one of the leading color management experts and color scientists, especially related to photography, well published, written several books, quite a few magazine articles. And he's the one that came up with it, but I've sort of adapted it, as have others, because it describes the process pretty well. What we're going to do is clean out everything related to Epson off our Mac computer and then install it fresh again. Now, the question is, why would you need to do that? And before we get into that, let's talk about maybe some less severe things that you might want to try first. Now, I will say that it's not difficult to do. It's not really hard. It's not dangerous. Basically, you're just going to delete a couple of items. You're going to reinstall, and that way you're fresh. Now, the downside is you might lose a few settings, but that's not a big deal. But let's talk about some things that go wrong and what you might do to fix them. So some of the symptoms include dialog boxes that don't look normal. For example, here we can see a dialog box and we can see that we have some Epson papers, but it just doesn't quite look right. And if we look over here, if we go to our printing dialog box, this is how it should set up right. In almost every Epson professional line printer, you're going to see this setup where it has printer settings and then a few other options. If we go to printer settings, you're going to have ability to choose your media type and to control your quality options. If those settings aren't there and instead you get something like this one here, where you see some media options, what's happened is Apple's driver has kind of been installed instead of the Epson driver. Another clue is if you go to your printer preference pane, you'll see over here when it says the driver type, you're going to see that it says AirPrint. And lately, I've had a trouble with my P900 where the AirPrint driver of Apple keeps trying to take over. But Apple does have a driver for this P900 printer that I have, for example, and you can see the icon is correct. It actually looks like the printer, but it's loaded the AirPrint driver. So that's kind of one of the symptoms. Now, one of the things you can do to fix this is just basically delete the printer from your printer preference pane and try to install that again. And that's pretty simple to do. Let me just walk through that really quick. So all we're going to do is go to our system preferences, and we're going to open up our printers and scanners. We're going to go to our printer and we're going to delete it. Then we're going to click the plus button and we're going to add it again. Now, the printer might have multiple connections. You notice here that my 900 says Bonjour, but it does not say Epson TCP/IP. And then in a little while, I can see the TCP/IP. Now, I have this connected via Ethernet, and I found that the TCP/IP is more reliable than the Bonjour. Now, this might be something that was true 5 years ago and no longer true, but I always wait till I see the IP, and then I'll click that. Should tell me the correct driver down here, and I'll hit add. But sometimes that doesn't work and you've got to be a little more drastic. So the next step is to actually reinstall the driver over the top of the old driver. Now we're going to show the driver installation process here when we get into the full Enema. And all you've got to do is skip the first couple of steps where we're deleting things and just go straight to downloading the new driver and install it if you want to try that. And I typically will try that next. And once we install the driver, one advantage is that the new software, and I don't know if this applies to the older Epson models, but now the Epson installer includes a step that automatically will add your printer to your printer queue list. And I found this has eliminated some of the problems and the conflicts with using Apple driver and the Epson driver. And a couple times I've even had that installation process say, oh, this printer looks like it's using the AirPrint driver. Would you like to switch to the Epson driver? And that's really the case when I'm using USB on my P900. I really have to install it into my preference pane through the installation process that Epson provides. And if it's messed up, I just reinstall the driver again and go let it do that process. And we'll cover that, as I said, as we get into the full process of walking through the whole Enema. You might not need to do the first couple steps of the Enema. You might just try putting the driver in first. Another thing that can happen once in a while is you'll use Lightroom, and when you go to your color settings and you go to select a different profile, the profiles for your Epson printer aren't in the list and you can't choose them. Normally, this can be solved by a driver reinstallation as well. It might require the Enema, but I would install the driver over the top of the old driver first and make sure Lightroom you quit that and then restart your computer. Normally those will come back, and it might take an Enema process to do that. I'm not sure where the mix-up is there. I do know that Adobe doesn't put the profiles in the spot that most profiles are. Apple has a color sync folder that everything references to, and these profiles are tucked away in this obscure little place. I might do a video about it someday, but normally if you reinstall the driver, that'll fix it. Worst case scenario, maybe try the Epson Enema if that's your problem. So another problem that has been kind of difficult to diagnose, and I see it happening to people, I've had it happen a couple of times, is a process where everything seems to be normal and you'll get a filter failed error in your printer dialog box. And so, or actually your printer queue dialog. Now I can't really duplicate it because I don't know what causes it. I will tell you what I've done. Most of the time when I've had the problem, there are two things that have happened. One of them is I've tried to send a file that's way too big and my network and my printer can't handle it. To give you an example, I've got an image which is a pretty high resolution, 84 by 32 at 360 DPI from Lightroom. And when I try to send that from Lightroom, but I send it in 16-bit, it seems to choke things up. Now, if I move it, tell the printer to just do it in 8-bit, seems to work fine. Now, it's got to be a really big file to do that, obviously, and there's not a real big advantage of staying in 16-bit going to a printer anyway, so not a big deal. The other time I've seen it, what I've ended up doing is basically changing something in the connection. USB cable. One time I had a Ethernet connection and I didn't know what it was, so I basically disconnected all the Ethernet stuff and reset the whole network, and I might have even put a new Ethernet cable in. But it seems like every time I've run into the problem, there's almost always an issue with the printer and the computer talking to each other, and the filter failed error seems to be that, hey, we're not communicating anymore. And that's actually another symptom you can get is can't communicate with a printer. Now, I can't duplicate those to give you a screenshot because I haven't seen those in a long time. I've got my network really solid now, and I haven't seen the filter failed or the communicate error for well over a year now. But that's one thing to try. Now, some people have reported that when they get the filter failed error, they've really got to go do the Epson Enema. Obviously, if everything you've done doesn't work, that's kind of the thing of last resort. We're going to perform this Epson Enema. One unique thing that I found, and this has happened to me like on 2 or 3 occasions, is suddenly my prints don't look right. Suddenly they're off just a little bit, and it's hard to pin down. And one reason I occasionally print a known reference print, which I talk about in this video up here in the corner, one reason to print one of these occasionally is because you know what it's supposed to look like. And if it looks wrong, then either you're doing something or something's happened to your driver. Let me just play you a couple of minutes from this video I did that talk about the problem I ran into and this problem where the color just suddenly is just off a little bit, and it required an Epson Enema to fix it. When I first was working on this video, I printed this file, and I'm going to hold this up, and I think I can zoom in, and you'll notice that how the strawberries, they don't look real good. And if you look over here, which side? If you look over here, you can see that I've got some really weird things going on in a couple of these color bands. And so that told me that, okay, I did something wrong because the strawberries should look a little redder than this, and these color ramps should all be smooth. And so what I did was I reinstalled my driver. I have a Macintosh computer, and once in a while the Epson driver just gets weird. So after I reinstalled it, I printed the file again, and you can see the difference. In fact, maybe I can actually hold them like this. You can see the difference in both the color ramps And those strawberries. These strawberries look, the bottom one looks that's what the file is supposed to look like. The strawberries are nice and rich. The yellows are really good. And notice all of my color ramps are now smooth. So one reason you use a file like this is if you don't get good results, then there's something in your setup or in your printer driver or something like that that you need to kind of resolve. Okay, so let's go through the process of doing a complete enema. As I mentioned, the first few steps you might skip and try just the driver installation. We're going to download a new driver from Epson to make sure it's the most current and reinstall it. You might do that first, and if that doesn't work, then go back and do the first couple of steps and then reinstall the driver. So let's just walk through the process of the entire enema. So the first thing we do is go to System Preferences, and we go to the Printers and Scanners, and we're just going to delete any Epson printer that's here in this menu. Just highlight it and click the minus sign. There is a more drastic step you can take, and I guess this is a case of last resort. If you've tried everything and you just want to make sure that the printing system is really clean, if we right click in this window or we control click in this window, we get an option to reset the printing system. That will basically wipe out everything related to printing in your Mac and put it back to factory spec. And basically you're going to start over. Now the downside to that is you're going to lose all of your custom paper sizes. You're going to lose every printer, every scanner. Basically this box is going to be blank. I've only had to do that once, and I probably didn't have to do it. I just did it because I had a mess in my folder. And so I did it more of a way to clean some stuff up. So most of the time we can just delete the printers. Now if you are using the LFP remote panel, you should find that and delete it as well. Next thing we're going to do is go to the Finder. We're going to open a new Finder window. We're going to go to our system hard drive or our startup hard drive. My case is called Macintosh HD. If you click on your computer, it's usually the one with the little silver icon. What we're trying to get to is our system library. Now this is different than our user library that's inside our user folder. You notice this is not inside a user folder. We're going to open that up. We're going to go to a folder called Printers. Open that, and we're going to take this Epson folder that's here, and we're just going to throw the whole thing in the trash. You have three ways to do that. You can drag it to the trash, just drag it down and put it in the trash. You can right click and say move it to the trash, or you can hold the command key down and hit the delete key. Now it's going to ask for your password because it is inside the system library. Put in our password, that's deleted. One. At this point, I recommend you empty your trash and then you restart your computer, and that will make sure that everything's cleared out and we're ready to install. The first step to installing our new driver is to download it. I recommend you download a fresh copy. We're just going to go to Safari, and we're just going to search for it. Just Epson P900 driver. Simple as that. You're looking for something that says Epson.com and support printers and the SureColor series. Depends on which printer you're downloading this for. And typically this is the link you're after. You're going to just click on the link, and yep, this is the right place. And under downloads, we're going to go to drivers, and we're going to just download this driver's utility combo package. If we click here, we can see the current version of the driver. It will also tell us what else it's going to install in case it's not this particular printer. We're just going to hit download. I've already done that, so I'm not going to do it. If you have any other printers, just do the same thing. For example, in my case, Epson P9570 driver. And there again, I go here and I would do the same thing. I would just go to downloads and I would download this package. So one thing I want to mention before we actually reinstall these drivers, it's recommended you install the oldest printer first. Not sure why. I assume there's some common files maybe, and an older printer, that file is an older version and not compatible with the same file in a newer printer. That's all I can come up with. Just seems best practice, so I recommend we do that. Now we just need to go find those downloads that we just brought over and open them up. And we're going to install it. Now I'm going to go ahead and walk through it because it has slightly changed. And I don't know if this applies to all Epson printers now or if just it applies to the newer ones. Let's go ahead and open it up. That's a security setting. You might have to go to your security preferences depending how they're set up to allow this to open. Hit continue, continue, agree to their terms. We do not need to install Epson User's Guide link. And I'm not going to participate. Now it's actually going to download the driver. wants your password because it's putting things in your system folder. Now it's doing the install. This whole process takes around 3 to 4 minutes usually. So now the driver's installed, but it wants to set up the printer. Now we could cancel this and do it ourselves in the preference pane. I strongly recommend you go through this process because I found, especially with the newer printers that have Wi-Fi like the P800 or P900, you'll get a more reliable connection and avoid problems. So we're just going to hit start. It wants to know if it's on the network, where in my case I'm a wired network connection. It's already on my network. It found it, so I just hit continue. And it will add it to the print queue. I don't have to do anything in the system preference pane. And now it will ask if you want to launch Media Installer. And this is one reason it's critical you let Epson set up the driver, because otherwise I don't think you get to this point. And running Media Installer, if you've got a P700, P900, 9500 series, 7500 series, is really important to get all your media types. I did a couple videos about the Media Installer. It's really useful. It's really handy. We're going to go ahead and launch it. Now, what I found is this doesn't actually do what I need it to do. And even though it launches it, because it's not the first time, I get a situation where my driver and my computer is not synced to the available papers in my printer. And so if you got one of the newer printers, I'm going to show you that right now. If you don't, then you probably can skip the next little part. But basically, if I go to Lightroom real quick and I go to my print settings and I go to my Epson P900 and I go here to my printer settings, this is all normal. Notice that under my fine art paper, I only have 5 fine art papers available. Now I've actually got 10 fine art papers in my printer and they're not being shown here. And it's kind of an odd thing, and I think somehow I need to get my printer and my driver to sync. Now, I'm not sure what causes it to sync, and I'm not sure if there's an easier way, but I have found one way that I definitely get it to sync. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch Epson Media Installer. Easiest way is just search for it. It's going to go out and look at my printers and see what's in my printers. And what you'll notice is I have listed here some papers that weren't in that menu. For example, Cold Press Bright was not in that menu. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete it, and I just need to do it for one paper, and that will force the whole thing to sync and they'll all be back. So I'm just going to highlight Cold Press Bright. I'm going to delete it. It will actually delete it from the printer as well as from the driver, even though it's not in my driver. It's not a choice that I'm given. Now what I'm going to do is go to Media Download, and I'm going to find that paper from Epson, Cold Press Bright, and you'll notice that it is not registered and it's not available. I'm going to say download and register this paper. Hit OK. This will put it back into my printer, and when it puts it into my driver, it forces the printer and the driver choices to synchronize up. So that step will return all of your papers that seem to be missing if you reinstall your driver or if you do the full Epson Enema. All right, so now if we go to Lightroom and we go to Print Settings and we go to Printer Settings, you'll see that all of my fine art papers are now back, even the custom one that I've put in myself. So that process forces the driver and the printer to sync up. There might be some other things that cause it to sync. I don't know. I just know this worked, and so I thought I'd throw that on there. All right, well, I think that kind of runs through the whole thing. Like I said, lots of little trouble. A lot of times you can just redo the printer. Sometimes you got to actually reinstall the driver. And occasionally you might have to do the whole Epson Enema. Now, I found that's actually pretty rare. I think I've done it in the last 5 years. I've had to do it 3 or 4 times, and a couple of those times I don't think that was the problem. Like I said, I think a couple of times when I was getting the filter failed error, it was more of a problem of too big of a file, and reinstalling the Enema didn't actually solve it. I still had the problem. But, you know, I'd like to help track that down. I know there's a few people, Mark Siegel and some others, that have really tried hard to track that down, and I don't think anybody's had any success trying to figure out exactly what causes that. Well, hope that was helpful. If you have any questions or ideas, or you saw something I maybe missed on, please let me know in the comments below. Until the next time, hey, thanks for watching. See ya.